Ladies and gentlemen, the two ordinary cops are back, and we're still here. We survived. Tell us about last week, Schulte.
Well, mate, I can tell you what a trip it was. And well, I think both of us might need a liver transplant afterwards. The problem with catching up with police officers I've found, or I pretty much well knew, the fact you have to have a beer with every single one of them, and it's not just one; it's multiple.
Oh,
So, so we we drank. Actually, Damo, I believe we might have even done you some damage.
in fact. So we've got a lot of photos, and we might have to put a heap up because they're so good. But yeah, I caught up with a couple of mates Saturday night after the Darwin City Christmas party, the Darwin City Police Station Christmas party, and I drank water all night. I could not possibly stomach a drink. It was just ridiculous. But I must admit, okay, we carried on like teenagers. Well, I'm not a teenager, neither are you, Schulte. We haven't been a
No.
teenager for decades. But um, it was how good was the Darwin City Christmas party? Just for like catching up with people who we didn't even know most of them, and all of a sudden we're just instant mates, and it was just brilliant.
Well, mate, in fact, I think you sent through 40 photos to me today from that night.
Yeah, I did. Once we got a bit, once we were in there and got to know everyone and sort of, but no one knew sort of what we were up to. There was a few who knew what we were doing, but they just thought we were guests of, Todd and Hoppy
Yeah.
and Brownie. We'll give them a shout out. A few others. My old PG from PG3 Darwin City, 2018. So
Yeah.
they're still there. Um, so we went around the whole room and took photos with every single person in the room just to sort of be able to promote it a bit. But by the end of it, we were mates with everybody. It was excellent. And it was good to see that even the really young'uns, I was chatting to a girl, she was about 23. And I said, yeah. And she goes, so I've never seen you at the station. Where are you from? I don't know what age she was. She was 16 in 2018 because I remember I said I was a shift sergeant at PG3 in 2018. And she goes, that was the year I turned 16. I went, well, you can go away. So, now she's a constable in one of the PGs in Darwin City. So, we had a ball, mate. It was so good.
It was really good. And it was good actually to meet some of the younger police officers, that have just joined the job and having a chat with them, and just trying to get from their perspective on what things are like as well. And I think we explained some of the younger people we had in our squad as well. So it's not all about age. It's about experience and what you can bring to the job. But mate, I think, look, it was a whirlwind trip, wasn't it? I mean, we went down, and I know we discussed some of this. We went straight down to Catherine, caught up with Kylie Anderson, commander of Catherine. We ran into so many people: Nick Burns, Spot, all those people, even the commissioner, and and Thomas Chalk. Superintendent Thomas Chalk, which you remember from
For those playing
Larimer,
along,
Last Stop Larimer.
Last Stop Larimer. He was the
Exactly.
OS there, Mataranka. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then we shot back up and we caught up with Swifty that that I think it was Wednesday night. Then the next night we sent through all this stuff to meet up at where's it, Landmark on Thursday night.
Yeah.
Anyway, we only had basically there was one we set up a thing on Facebook as interested, and there was only one person we had going. We said, oh geez, this might be the bloody end of us. But mate, I reckon we had about 20 people there just about the whole night.
Yeah, there were people who didn't even know us sort of that turned up, and
Yeah.
it was a brilliant night. That was excellent. And catching up. You know what I loved, and I'll give him another shout. Dave Cubis and Chris Killian were there. And
Yes.
so the beauty of Dave Cubis was our squad firearms instructor in 2007. And even then he was an extremely experienced copper, had been in since 1984.
Yep.
And just having a yarn to him was so good. Just the old stories and just unbelievable. But I do have a quick story I need to tell about you.
Okay.
I don't know if we told this on the podcast yet, have we?
You talking about the chicken wings?
Yeah, I think we did. We already spoke about
We
that.
did.
We
Yeah,
spoke
mate.
about it.
So,
Yeah, we
look,
did.
that was pretty memorable. I've made sure everybody knew about that one because I was pretty impressed with myself as well. Not that it really
Oh,
bothered
yeah.
me, but I just
We,
thought how if you actually took a video shot of that, like people would just be, how the fuck did he do that?
we're talking about things that would make the average person squirm and not want to eat for an hour.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about it, Shilty is shoveling chicken wings into his face. It was memorable. It was very, very impressive, mate. It's good to see we haven't lost our touch.
No, that's exactly right. And look, there's a couple other people I think that rocked up that night as well. Duggo and
Like
Tiffany,
on Brit, yep.
Brittany, sorry.
Yeah.
And I think they were the last ones standing with us. Which
Well, the
was
beauty of having Duggo there, he actually he was the one who brought up the plane crash that we were talking about. He was the one. He was also there. I'd forgotten that he was there as well the next day when we were recovering bodies.
mm,
And he was the one who said, "Oh, mate, I remember that. We remember." And look, everyone's listening to this. I'm about to tell you a bad story. So if you want to skip forward 30 seconds, feel free. When we picked one of these fellas up, they'd been rendered. They'd been burnt really badly, and a lot of rendered body fat fell out of this person. Anyway, it was at that point that I looked up at Schulte and I saw him eating chicken wings, and it was yeah. So anyway, I'd forgotten that because it splattered all over me. But look, we're not belittling. We're not making that a joke. That was
no,
bad. That was a bad job. But and the context of that job wasn't funny. We weren't talking about that in a funny way. It was just Duggo was also was expressing to us what he'd seen that day because he goes, "Oh,
yeah,
you spoke about that job. I hadn't thought about that in so long." He goes, "I remember that. My God, that was full on." Like, and it really was. So, um, we brought comedy out of that.
yeah,
We brought humor out of that. But I'll reiterate what I always say: our humor is never at the expense of any victim ever.
no,
So we have to survive this horrible crap, and the way we do that is humorous, and that humor is inappropriate.
yeah.
It's inappropriate in any other circle, but we're just putting that out there. So
Yeah, mate. I think and that's what we talked about debrief. That's what it's
yeah,
about. It's about and look, yeah, we do make a bit of humor out of it, but like you said, not expense to the the poor people that are involved in it and all that sort of thing. But it's
no,
also it's for us. It's the way we debrief and the way we actually move on. And even years down the track, that conversation we had is therapeutic.
mate, it was solemn, wasn't it? Like you did you see? I mean, that night also, I already spoke about it last week. We had belly laughs that night that made my gut hurt for 3 days.
yeah,
But at that point, when we were talking about that crash, there was no laughter. It
no,
was everyone there was a mutual understanding about what we were talking about.
yeah,
And mate, that was good. It was really good actually. I forgot that Duggo was there. So that
yeah.
was really good that he was able to go, yeah, oh geez, I remember that. And yeah, so anyway, it was good.
Yeah, it was good, mate. And then I think on the Friday, mate. Well, that's when we geared up for the Christmas party at the Darwin Police Station Christmas party. So that
Oh
was,
yeah.
and yeah. I mean, I think we finished at 2 in the morning, mate. Was it?
Mate, I remember it all, which is surprising. But I remember the last thing I did, there's a heap of guys around. I said, righto, my shout. I said, what are you having? And they said, oh, vodka and whatever. Or, like a lemon lime and soda or vodka lime and soda. And I said, vodka Red Bull it is. What are you having? Oh, I'll have a pint of Guinness. Vodka Red Bull it is. Absolute lunacy. But anyway, that's what we did. That was shenanigans, and that was about right on closing time. I'd hate to look back at my Combank account and see what the bloody expense of that shout was, but anyway, it happened. So,
Oh,
but
and I
no,
remember.
it was so good just to. I remember we had fun with everybody that night. There were just people at the pub that we'd never met before that we were just having a laugh with. It was brilliant.
Yeah,
It was
yeah. No, it
proper
was
top
cracking
end.
night.
Uh,
It was such a great night,
yeah,
and then we we were kind of a bit sad and sorry probably the next morning to a certain extent. We caught up with a few for breakfast because we stayed at the Novotel that night, and then we who'd we catch up? Oh, with bloody Junior and Alicia
yep,
that
Junior
evening.
and Alicia.
Yep.
I
So it
still
was
haven't
really good
convinced
to
Junior
catch
to
up.
come on, but that's okay. We'll have a chat to him.
Yeah, yeah, but it was really good to chat with them and find out where their paths have gone since we left as well. Because life does move on and all that sort of thing. But it was just like we spoke to them yesterday. It was
So that's the overarching thing. I know that we're talking about people we know, and that the vast majority of our listeners have no idea who we're talking about. We're just talking about old friends that we knew years ago, hadn't spoken to for years, And I think the whole point was the policing profession never leaves you, and the people that you know, you can pick up a conversation 5 years later, and it's like you saw him 5 minutes ago. And we mentioned that last week, and I think this is just the wrap up. We're going to move on, mate, but
Yep.
I just think that was good for us, wasn't it? How good was that?
Oh,
Going
yeah.
back with people knowing about the podcast, having listened to it, but our friends who'd experienced stuff, I think it was really positive. It was just such a good trip.
I think like to finish up on that part, mate. Like the best part was everybody was so happy with the podcast. We didn't run
Yeah.
into anybody that was upset with it. Like they all really liked it, and
And we
listened to
were
it.
talking about people who would tell us it's crap and you
Yeah,
blokes need to shut up. And they didn't. And that's what put a bit of wind in our sails, I reckon.
yeah, definitely, yeah, for sure.
So
So that was really good.
yeah.
But mate, you want me to go on to some of the shout outs?
Yeah, mate, get into it. Yep.
Well, mate, look, a lot of them, we haven't had many new ones, but we have a heap of people. And, like, Kevin, he's a cop in UK. He got in contact with us again, like just send around different stuff. I've actually asked him if he'll come on a podcast because I think it'll be interesting to get a perspective from the UK. So, but we'll see how he goes with that. He's pretty experienced. He's actually an Australian boy originally, but then moved over to the UK. So, no, it'd be really interesting to get some feedback on that. Joshua, he's New South Wales, and he actually he did have something, mate. If you want to touch on this a bit, so he
Yep.
actually said, so I'm trying to what is it? Yeah, he said he basically, what did he say? He wanted to hear our thoughts on our first roles when we left GDs. Basically, he's at that position in his career where obviously he's doing a bit of metro region and just wants to move or look at going into specialized roles or see where he wants to go in the future. And any thoughts like on how we did it and all that sort of thing. And before you start, I'll probably anything I did when I was training officers as probies coming in and I was a training officer, the first thing I'd ask them is what they're interested in. And what they told me, I would then introduce them to people that are in that field just to try and get their foot in the door and also get their interest to see if that's what they really want to do. But mate, have you got any more you want to add about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, but that's fantastic advice because, and you tell them, reach for the stars. If you've got a brand new probie who's going, you're not going to be okay. If you want to do GDs for life, do GD. That mate, GDs is where it's at. I remember that old saying. It's like if you want all the excitement, all the madness, and all of everything that comes with that, the GDs there's a reason they call it general duties is because you experience every single piece of policing. But the other thing is, GDs is also very exhausting and it wears you down. That is the lights and sirens in uniform. If you call the cops, these guys turn up. Two blokes or two not blokes, but two people in the car turn up. That's general duties policing.
Yep.
The specialised roles in the police force in any jurisdiction are vast and varied. And New South Wales being such an enormous jurisdiction, there is massive opportunities in criminal investigation and very specialised criminal investigation. It might be that I like investigating stuff. I like working out what happened, and that's a fantastic place to start because you might go into a general crime area in a region, or if you're in Sydney. My suggestion might even be if he's a fairly junior guy and he's looking at what he wants to do, and I don't know his circumstances, but maybe if you're in Sydney, get out of Sydney. Maybe go to a regional area. You'll get more. You'll get more opportunity in a regional area, especially if you're interested now in specialised roles. There's so many places in New South Wales being regional centres that have specialised police in those areas, and you'll have more access to that in those
Yep.
regional areas if you're posted there in general duties. But I mean, I'm not going to give anyone massive career advice, but it would be don't just settle. Work out what you really, really want to do. Find something you may have experienced a job where you dealt with some specialists. Could be anything. Could be tactical operators. Could be you might have been exposed to some negotiators, forensics. Who knows what? Anything like that. If you found that really interesting, really look at that because don't hold yourself back. I mean, the
Yep.
guys who are in there now, they were GDs just like you once. So those positions are available everywhere and every jurisdiction's the same. But New South Wales being so huge, And like I think New South Wales is the second biggest police force in the world, and I could be dead wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I
Yeah.
think one of the only bigger police forces like NYPD or something. So New South Wales police force is enormous. So um, we came from the smallest. I think us and Tassie are very similar, but
Yeah.
the NT was tiny. So you got to know everybody, but New South Wales is enormous. So there's opportunity everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd say grab it and let you tell your OIC that you're interested in something.
Yes.
So, hey, boss, I'd really like an opportunity to have a crack at this. And if you're a good operator, you're a good worker on the road, and you've got a good OIC, that OIC will develop his staff. So he or she will take them aside and go, yeah, no worries. There's a little opportunity here. We've had a crime spree, and the scene of crime officers need help. They need someone to help out. And if you're interested in that, it
Yeah.
might be that there's a big siege or something. And if you see it happening in your area, ring your OIC and say, I really want to be a part of this. I just want to experience something and get in there and get absorbed into it. And I mean, I know there's limitations, overtime and things like that. There's limitations on that. But do your best. If you're involved in a critical incident, hang around and be the outer cordon and have a chat to those specialists and, yeah, pursue the courses. I'd say take every opportunity you can possibly get because there's so many opportunities. Like,
Oh,
bloody
definitely, mate.
courses. They run courses on everything all the time. And just if you develop a reputation as a good worker, a good operator, as a general duties operator, then yeah, things will fall in. Well, they won't fall in your lap. You have to chase them. But
Yeah.
yeah, don't ever miss an opportunity. Would be the advice, and just find what you love and go with it. Because the beauty of the police is you can completely change your career within the police force.
Mm.
So, I mean, the beauty talking to Alicia the other day. Alicia was a hard hitting general duties copper. She did not step backwards. I remember working with going, calm
Yeah.
down, Squish.
Hey, hey, mate. That she is the second Grim Reaper too. Remember?
Yeah, she is. She's a death magnet, that girl.
Yeah.
Anyway, but she's now a fingerprints expert and she's loving it. She said, I love it now. I absolutely love my job. So that was so good. I just listened to her talk and you could see the passion in her eyes that she's happy. And her
Oh,
husband's now a superintendent. So they're a policing family, obviously. But yeah, it was interesting. It was good, yeah. So, but yeah,
yeah.
my advice there, and for whatever my advice is worth, would be just don't miss an opportunity. Just yeah, take
Yeah.
everything on
Just
board.
grab with both hands. And mate,
Yeah,
you said something important before, and something I that you just reminded me a point that I made. There was one of the probies that I trained was really interested in crime, and I just went to the shift sergeant. I said, oh, because I'd already worked as a plainclothes connie, I'd worked in that role. We'd already done, I've been helping out with murder investigations, all that sort of thing. And I just went to shifty and I said, all the difficult jobs come to us because
yep.
that's the only way you can actually train a probie on what they need to learn. So, and it was, I think it was that time we had a whole lot of drug related stolen vehicles fleeing from Darwin. And what was it? What was that place called? It wasn't. Oh, what was it? It was called something in Darwin where they all bloody used to do drugs and steal and
Oh, you're gonna have to.
it was a
It's
set of
called Greater
flats.
Darwin.
Yeah, no, it was a set of flats, and I think it was Palmerston. It was called, oh no, Sin City or something like that. I can't
Sin
remember.
City. It was Sin City. Yeah,
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
a set of flats at
So
Palmerston. Yeah,
yeah, so and we got actually a whole roll of those where they'd actually run away and come through. One actually rolled the car and all that with his girlfriend in it, and so we took all those jobs, and yeah, that probie ended up becoming a very good detective later on, which
yeah.
kind of pleases me. I just showed him the path, and then he took over and became far better than I was in that role. But that's what it's about. It's
Oh, absolutely,
yeah,
mate. One of my proteges, I won't mention him because he's fairly high ranking now in Darwin, but in Tennant Creek years ago, I had a very, very, very keen young probie Connie. I sort of took him under my wing a bit, and mate, he runs rings around me now. There's no way I could keep up with him, but
yeah,
he was really interested in proactive crime and all the rest of it back in the day. And I'm not taking credit for him. That was all him.
yeah,
But he now runs a very hard hitting unit in Darwin, and he always had that motivation. I said, "Yeah, mate, we can do a bit of that." And I sort of knew way back. I don't know anything what he knows now, but way back then, um, he was all over it. And yeah, now he's now pretty well known detective in Darwin. So it's
yeah,
yeah, those and that was mate. I'm not taking credit for that. What it was I take credit for just showing him the ropes early on. and he just ran with it, and now he's an absolute superstar now. But yeah,
Yeah, no, that's
yep.
awesome, mate. I'll give the next one, mate. We've got Normie G, basically Vic Pol. Basically, and yeah, it says thanks very much. Loves listening to the stories and all that sort of thing. And you know, um, I think he's got some connections up in the NT and all that sort of thing. And he said he likes to hear like it. He said more non-members need to hear like our points of view and all that, you know, because he said
Mm.
policing's a hard job. It's definitely getting harder, and you know, especially like he's worked in GD's, you know, family violence unit, and CIU, which is criminal investigations unit, and all that sort of thing. So I think he's happy that we're actually getting some of the stories out there, what it's like working behind the scenes, mate. And I think you know, from you've actually had a couple of people in the pub that listened to you and never realised, like you
Mm.
know, that aren't police, aren't connected with police, that actually, you know, really now understand police a little bit better.
Oh, mate, it's been weird actually because I've had I would say 20 people who aren't coppers, and they've just gone, we had no idea. Like, we can't believe the stories you're telling us. Like, but that you can forgive that because they're living their own lives. These are people who've got their own jobs. They've got their own. It's like asking me what I know about meteorology.
Yeah,
Now, it's funny because I piqued a bit of interest in meteorology lately, and it's like I didn't know any of this stuff. It's the same thing. So people see coppers, and they, oh yeah, well shit, better slow down, and that's all they sort of think about. And it's like the job's so much more. People watch the news and they don't listen. They just glaze. Oh, that's a terrible job. It's like, well, yeah, but look at all those blue uniforms around that job. Well, that's just us. They're just normal people doing their job, and they're all surrounded this thing that you think's horrible on the news.
yeah,
So, and I think we said that last week, mate. That we've changed. Like, we're normalising that. We just want people to understand that the cops are just people. Like,
yeah,
they're not this big, band of, I don't know, just soldiers who just do the government's bidding. It's not like that at all. There's separation of powers. The laws exist, and the government who's currently in power has nothing to do with that. They can create new law. That's about it. They
yeah,
don't get to tell the cops, you need to go and do this now. It's like, go away. Who are you? There's separation of powers for a reason.
exactly.
We operate under legislation and we operate completely independently of the parliament. It's got nothing to do with that. And then I will also add the courts operate completely independently of us and the
Yeah,
parliament. So this is good. It's a good thing. Sometimes
yeah,
it frustrates the living shit out of me, Shilty, but it's a good thing. It's needed. It's needed in a democracy. You don't want a superpower. You need different inputs to allow freedom for people. And I'm not saying I'm saying that there are laws already in place that a really bad person. There are laws for that. The police already have the power to do that. I remember my mates at the Dorigo podcast. They're legends. Mick and Mick at the Dorigo podcast. I'll give them a shout
yep,
out. I had a chat to them the other day. They're now doing a radio program, and they just wanted to talk about Alice Springs. And I remember them saying one of the things they said, "Do you have the power? Do you have the powers? You got no power to do anything." It's like, no, we got plenty of power. We don't need any more power. We got plenty of power. If you commit an
mm,
offence, you're under arrest. Done. We don't need more power than that. It's not
yeah,
our. You never want to live in a world where the police are the judge, jury, and executioner. It's we're not the judge, we're not the jury, and we're not the executioner. We're hunters and gatherers. We gather evidence and we hunt down criminals and we present them before the court, and then the court takes them and deals with them according to law. We've got nothing to do with the courts.
no,
And this is what a lot of people don't understand. Like the courts and the lawyers and everything else, that's not us. We present them to the court. We present people before the court and we provide an allegation. And they take that allegation and they look at it and they go back and forth and you've got a defense and you've got prosecution. So the prosecution debates why this person should be penalized in some way. They have a defense lawyer, and that can be a publicly provided defense lawyer, or they can purchase their own lawyer, and that they will provide legal assistance to them, whether it be defence or whatever, in that context. And the judge is completely independent of that, and they make a call, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with the people who presented them towards the court.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people forget that. They sort of forget that there's a separation of powers is born out of centuries of history. So you don't, you don't want to live in a world where Adolf Hitler can turn around and go execute those men, and you don't get a say back. It all sounds good until it's you on the executioner block. And there's been plenty of people who've gone to court and they want to have their say. And these are good humans who've just made a mistake, or some error that they weren't aware of was against the law. And it is absolutely appropriate that those people have somebody who knows the law well to represent them with the knowledge of the law on their behalf in the court of law and explain what's gone on. And they provide what's called instructions. So the defense lawyer will listen to, well, okay, the allegation's this. What do you have to say about that? In a protected environment, being legal privilege, and they get to say, well, no, I didn't know that. I'm acting in good faith. I didn't know. I had my guns. I'll give you an example, a really basic rural example that happens all the time. Is the police will turn up for some reason and there'll be an insecure firearm. It might be sitting on a bench in a workshop. I'm not justifying the behaviour. I'm just saying that there might be an insecure firearm because he's had problems with foxes. So he left his gun out so he can quickly grab the fox and shoot a fox if it's trying to kill his chooks. He's not about to harm anybody, but it is against the law and he's going to get prosecuted for that. But he shouldn't be hung, drawn and quartered. The bloke's just, he's made a mistake in law, and the lawyer is the one who articulates that on his behalf in the court. And that's really important that you get your time in court. The prosecution will just present bald-faced facts. Police attended, this firearm was unattended at the time on the bench, and as a result, the firearms was registered to him, and bang, he's before the court. And that could be an extremely productive, very valuable member of the Australian population, but he's committed an offence and he doesn't completely understand why. And that's where his defence lawyer comes in.
Yeah.
And that's that separation. The Parliament, I mean, I've gone into a rant about how the government works, but that's okay.
Well, mate, I think what we'll have to do, we'll have to talk about the separation of powers, because it's not really, well, widely known, I think, what it's about. I had to do a talk on the separation of powers, and I learnt a lot when I was doing the operator and investigators course, which is another story which you actually got me into, and you didn't actually get on that course. But we'll talk about that one another day, mate. But but the separation of powers is very interesting for anybody that wants to actually read up on it. But we will do a podcast about it, because it is actually, I think it's awesome. And I think, mind you, mate, and you might agree with me here, some politicians need to probably learn more about it. Because,
oh, my God.
You see him trying to step over the line every now and again. But anyway, mate, look, we'll move on, because we have got a really good topic to talk about tonight. And, and this will get you really going. But before we do that, I'll just say, like, another shout out to Caleb. He's just a chippy. And just,
no such thing as just a chippy.
Just a chippy. Oh, mate, I'll tell you what, I would be terrible as a chippy, and I do a bit of stuff from time to time, mate. But how the hell can you, what is it? Measure twice, cut once, or whatever? I can measure 50 times, and I'll still have to cut 50 times. Like, and
better than me.
Oh yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, that was his words. But mate, everybody's got their talents in this world, and I'll tell you what, stick to it, because it's I did a bit of that when I left the police, and I can tell you what, I'm not a chippy's ass, that's for sure. But I always marvel on how good they actually are. It's just incredible the way they work. But mate, otherwise, I'm going to do a shout out to Rachel. Now, Rachel wants to ask, and I know we've touched on a little bit, and this is handing over to you, Damo, so you can basically talk as much as you like on this one, because you've got all the information. Well, I suppose probably one of the most experienced in the information in this one. But discuss Ben Hoffmann, mate. What do you got to say about that?
Jesus, righto, yeah. So, I was fairly heavily involved in this. And look, I was not involved in apprehending him or anything like that. But like I've said in previous episodes, I was a police negotiator, so I was an on-call. The police negotiation unit in the Northern Territory is not a full-time unit. There's people they do their day job, and they're trained negotiators, and we do negotiator on call. So when you're on call for a week, you'll take the phone home. And if you get a big job, you get the call and you respond and you call out the other negotiators as need be. But the Northern Territory is not a huge place, as we've spoken about before. So the negotiator jobs, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of them, but they're not constant. It's not like New South Wales where there'd be negotiators needed lots, or Queensland or Victoria. So anyway, I was at home on a day off, and I get this obscure message on my phone. We had a WhatsApp group, a negotiator on-call WhatsApp group, and that's how the on-call negotiator would call you out if you needed to go to work. So I get this message, and I picked my phone up, and I just looked at it, and it went armed offender in the city, couple of people required. And the trouble is, what was frustrating was they didn't say active armed offender with a firearm in the city. They just said armed offender in the city. And the trouble is, Darwin, there's an armed offender every 10 minutes in Darwin City. We've got a male with a knife walking down the street. And 9 times out of 10, you pull up next to him. Hey, countryman, what are you doing with that knife there? Oh, sorry, but going for family cut up meat. So we've mentioned that before with the bush policing. So there's Aboriginal community in there, and they hunt animals and they catch fish and they just cut them up wherever they want, and they just cook them there and they feed family, and there's no trouble. Anyway, so I sort of went, oh, yeah, okay, so it's nothing much. And then I got a phone call. And the phone call, actually, it's relevant that I say who it is. It was actually Mark Turner, who's now a member of the Northern Territory Parliament. But he rang me, and he was the on-call negotiator. Well, I think he had the on-call phone, but I think there'd been an issue with the transfer of the on-call. He was in Melbourne, so he couldn't go to the job. He rang me and said, mate, we need people to go to this because we've got a couple of people shot apparently, and TRG are responding, and that changed the whole tune of it. It was, I've gone from okay, active, I'll make a phone call and see what the go is, to I jumped in my 1995 model Holden Rodeo Ute, and I've never seen so much black soot come out the back of it. So I've hauled in to PMC, the Peter McCauley Centre in Darwin, which is the sort of the specialised police and the investigative sort of hub, and it's where comms is and everything else. And I pulled straight into the back of TRG, so the cave, as they call it up there, which is the the territory response group, but it's the tactical operators. So they've all responded. And I turn up there, and the door's open.
Sorry, mate. Can I just cut in there? Just for people that weren't aware, Ben Hoffmann is basically a guy that ran a rampage through Darwin with a shotgun and killed a number of people, because there might be a couple of people that don't know.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I should have mentioned that. Yeah, so it was in, I think it was June 2019. He was a former inmate who got out of prison and got on the methamphetamine, and he had a pump action shotgun, and he shot 5 people, killed 4 in a rolling, a moving, dynamic, active shooter incident where he was driving from place to place, and he was shooting victims from place to place in a vehicle. So he'd turn up at one place and shoot someone, and have a blue and drive to another place, shoot someone, move on. So that's what was coming in. So sorry, mate, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. I'm just skimming straight to the response. As you do.
Hey, on your way. Keep going, mate.
So anyway, I'm in the back of the cave at TRG, and I remember hearing over the radio his surrender. So because obviously we'd come out. The whole thing took about not even half an hour. So it would have taken me 20 minutes just to drive to PMC from Palmerston. So by the time I got there, it had resolved. But I'll give you a rundown of what had occurred. So the story was, and he's now been sentenced. It's all in the public domain. But what had happened was, he was a fella who had been dating a lady apparently before he went to prison, who was a prostitute, and he'd heard that she'd been badly abused by a few, especially a man called Alex was the big call. And he sort of knew that this was at a set of flats just on the outskirts of Darwin City. One day he had a huge binge on the methamphetamine. He'd gone and already planned that he was going to kill this guy, and he had a Remington 870 pump-action shotgun. He'd gone and sourced ammunition, being OOSG ammunition. For people who don't know much about firearms, basically that's the most severe shotgun round you can get. There's 9 big ball bearings in those shotgun rounds, and they're designed to kill bucks. They call it buckshot. It's designed to kill big deer in the US. And all the police forces use them for humans, basically, because they're the most effective round for that kind of thing. But anyway, he's attended there, and He burst into a room at this set of units, and he's got these two poor buggers on the ground. There's a male and a female in that room, and he got them on the ground, and he fired a round, and the round ricocheted and hit the woman, so she was wounded. And then he's threatening to execute the male, and he's begged and gone, "Who are you? I don't even know who you are." And he's going, "Where's Alex? Where's Alex?" And he basically didn't know. Anyway, he kept kicking doors in, and he went to basically the residence of this set of units, and there was a taxi driver in there who was a fella from overseas who was just a taxi driver home on his break, half-hour break or whatever. He's burst in there, and unfortunately, this fella was an Islamic guy from overseas, and his name was Ali something, but everyone called him Alex in Australia. So he's kicked the door in and gone, "Alex, where's Alex?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm here. I'm Alex." And he just shot him multiple times and killed him. Completely wrong identity. He got him wrong. He then went mobile, went to another address where he's kicked the door in. I don't know the exact details there, but he burst in and shot another man who was completely unrelated to what he was on about. He was just on a methamphetamine binge. He then went to the back of the Buff Club, which is a bit of a licensed premises on Smith Street, just heading out of the city. Called a fella outside who he knew, who involved, I think, a little bit with methamphetamine, but otherwise not a bad person, like not a prolific criminal, just maybe a person who'd been involved in the drug trade a little bit, and punched him to the ground and then executed him in cold blood with his shotgun. He then went on to a metal recycling place and engaged a fellow who was a security guard, and he was off duty, but he was working as a security guard, and he had a hell of a fight with him because I think he shot and wounded him, and then there was a massive, horrendous struggle for life, and in the end, Hoffmann killed this person, but was severely stabbed himself. I think this guy armed himself with a knife to defend himself, and it actually stabbed Hoffmann back. Hoffmann then moved on and went to the Peter McCauley Centre, the front counter of the Peter McCauley Centre, and tried to kick the front door in, which went unnoticed because comms is locked away, and the front counter was shut. And this is about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. So there was blood all over the front door. It was incredible. I turned up. I must have been so close. I would have turned up very close to the time that he was there, if not just a few minutes after he'd left. Because when I turned up at the counter, he was surrendering it in town. So maybe 10 minutes. So it might have been 10 minutes after he'd been kicking on the front door, armed with a shotgun, covered in blood. I turned up at that same facility. And anyway, I heard over the radio as he was apprehended. So obviously, we've now got an enormous critical incident that's occurred in Darwin, Greater Darwin region. And because the Northern Territory is so small, we need all hands on deck. I've turned up at that stage, I was a detective sergeant in Strike Force Trident. So my primary role was running a property crime team that dealt with volume property crime, serious and complex property crime that was outside the ability of GDs. And because I'm the on-call negotiator, I'd responded as a negotiator, not from Trident. But because I'm a detective, I'm now there. So we've gone into a very quickly established emergency operations centre within the communications centre itself. So we just went to another room in the Peter McCauley Centre, and we get a very rough briefing of what's just occurred and what we know about. And I just took my negotiator hat off, I should say, and put my investigator hat on. And then all of a sudden we're like, right, we've got crime scenes here. We've called out night shift. They're already on duty. Evening shift, Darwin City's locking down the crime scenes. We've called out all of forensics. We've got, at that stage, they had 5 crime scenes. Peter McCauley Centre front counter being one, which wisely was quickly just terminated. Like, it wasn't relevant to the homicides. He turned up there and kicked the door, but it was on camera. Like, he was on CCTV. So we don't really need a crime scene there when we need to concentrate resources elsewhere. Anyway, so the resources were very firmly concentrated on the 4 sites of the deceased people. And his vehicle was also seized and forensically examined, and the firearm and everything else. And he's now in custody. And so he himself is being processed forensically for DNA swabs, whatever else, because he's had contact with other people. And so it became this massive investigation that went for weeks. And I remember I walked out of the main briefing and I rang my officer in charge and I said to him, I told him what I'd done. I've been called to this as a negotiator, but here's what we've got. I'm just preempting what's going on. Everyone's so stretched, it's not funny, but we need all of Trident on this now. And he just, to his credit, just went, yeah, yep, no worries, just call them all out. So I rang through all my crew. He rang the other sergeant. And basically we mobilised our unit. But obviously there's other units. You've got the major crime unit, serious crime unit. They've all been called out. This thing's bigger than Ben Hur. Like, it's just enormous. We got this massive scenes that we now need to process, and hundreds of witnesses and lots of forensics. And just the biggest job I've ever been involved in. And for the next 3 weeks, very quickly, I was very impressed. They broke it up into projects. So straight away they go, Project Alpha will be looking at the background of the. I can't remember the exact details of what the projects were, but I remember Alpha was looking at the victims, and Bravo was the main effort. Sort of, that was the, or maybe it was Alpha, whatever it was. That was the main effort. So, righto, what has Ben Hoffmann done? Gather evidence to prove the murders that Ben Hoffmann has committed, and we are working towards interviewing Ben Hoffmann and processing him as the offender. Bravo was looking at the victims and who they are and all the rest of it, and pouring into the coronial side of things and all the rest of it. And there was Charlie and Delta. There was definitely up to F, because Foxtrot was all about the firearm. Where did the gun come from? And I remember this job just grew. Like, obviously you got the initial response that night, but the next day there were more people involved, and then more people involved. And it's just this enormous investigation, because we can't accept the fact in the sleepy little town of Darwin, which has got a lot of problems, but they're low-end problems. We don't have mass murders occur on a regular basis just quietly. So it's really important for the police to get to the bottom of what has occurred here. And that was enormous. We were doing massive days and really, really thorough CCTV. I think Operation or Project Charlie was actually gathering CCTV footage of the whole incident. So you can imagine he's driven all over town and he's gone past plenty of cameras. So their job was to go through the intelligence idea or the intelligence picture that had been developed about his movements, and to gather closed circuit television and identify witnesses that have seen this vehicle moving, because he was driving quite erratically, so it was quite memorable. But the idea was to track him through his entire movements. Project Foxtrot was looking at the origins of this firearm, who owned it, where it came from, where the ammunition came from, who was involved in offering that. Because we're not just looking at Hoffmann, we're looking at multiple offenders. We're trying to lock down every single person who's provided him any level of accessory, and they're going to become offenders as well. So we're delving right into where the gun came, and then that created further offenders who I'm pretty sure faced court for providing the firearm, providing the ammunition, all this kind of thing. So you got to remember that the other thing is listening to all the police radio transmissions, and that was my job about day 3. I'll never forget. Everyone's pretty calm, and I was, as a detective sergeant, I was involved in the office management. So as sergeants, we sit as sort of the head of the octopus that I've mentioned before of the investigation, where the tentacles go out and gather the information and bring it back to the head. We analyse all the statements and all the information coming in and generate further lines of inquiry. So we were reading all these statements, looking at the CCTV, and then putting it all together, having a chat amongst ourselves and developing further lines of inquiry, and then tasking out those lines of inquiry to investigative teams. One of my jobs was to listen to all of the police radio from that incident, and mate, I was climbing the wall. Anyone who's been involved in any kind of emergency services, I know the RFS is big on it. You can hear it in their voice, and we mentioned this in other podcasts where you can hear desperation in people's voices. Well, here I am hearing, yeah, shots fired over the radio. And like, yeah, further shots fired, vehicles now mobile. So I'm listening to this thing happen real time in my head. And I'm the first person to listen to all those radio calls on multiple channels, because Darwin Channel 1, which covers Darwin and Casuarina sectors, was getting onto the channel that covers Katherine and Palmerston and going, all Palmerston units attend the city, immediately change to Channel 1 for information. And I remember getting a text message from the shift supervisor in Katherine going, oi, mate, you all good? And I said, yeah, mate, bit busy. Talk to you soon. And it was just crazy. Like, it was just, the Northern Territory is a very busy jurisdiction. We deal with a lot of stuff, but we don't deal with stuff like this. We don't deal with. I mean, there's murder all the time, but it's one on one. Like it's very rare for this multiple moving murder. It's got an innocence in a way about it. The Northern Territory. It doesn't have that. It's got a lot of issues, but it is not a sinister place. It's quite an innocent place in a lot of ways. We don't have the terrorism stuff that Southwest Sydney's got. We don't have the Lint Cafe. We don't have stuff like that. It doesn't happen in the Northern Territory. And this was the biggest thing that any of us had ever experienced. I know there's been big shootings in the past. 1996, the Palmerston shootout. 1999, the killing of Glenn Hewitson at Adelaide River. So there are really memorable big jobs that everyone knows about. But the Hoffmann shooting was just massive. As far as an investigative response, it was just enormous.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, and I remember the number of statements was just incredible.
I just want to add in there, Pete, like as well. Like what you got to understand is, like, yeah, the Northern Territory is small, and like you said, they have a lot of smaller, like significant incidents. This was a massive one. However, the structure that so everybody has their lane. Like you said, you got the octopus and you got all the tentacles going out and all that sort of thing. But everybody in that field, so say Operation Alpha, they have to stick to their lane. It do not get sidetracked by anything else. This is how you run an efficient investigation, or it's even how you run an efficient workplace. Everybody has to stick within their lines of inquiry and their lines of investigation, and that is how it's all managed. I've said the pyramid effect. You've said the octopus. It's exactly the same thing. You need those people in those roles to be able to collect the information, then send it out, and then you send and I've been a minion. They go out, you get that, you come back. It is so important, and I think I sometimes I wish society would actually see some ways the police run these things and work out how efficient it is. When you think about the information, all the stuff you had to check. I did the CCTV for a murder investigation, which was just a one-off incident, and I had to get 24 hours before and 24 hours after the incident. That's a massive undertaking. You are talking about something that's 100 times bigger, probably more, but yet you did it efficiently, and that is because of the structures in place. And I think it's important that people understand the way the police work. Some people might not like it, but it's there for a reason, and it's how. And look, full credit to the NT Police on how they handled that. I think it was excellent. When you consider the amount of investigation, the amount of information that had to be gathered, and then also go through to prosecution, it was an outstanding. It's one of those things that the NT Police can actually hold that proud and said, "Good,
Yeah,
you did that well."
and look, mate, I take no credit for it because I had a small part to play. I had to move back within. I think I was there for a week. The job went for a very long time, but the trouble was, Strike Force Trident was a very busy unit, so we couldn't all be involved in this one job while there's just multiple bloody incidents happening all over the place. At some point, we had to pull back our resources.
Yep.
But I mean, that initial response was definitely needed. They needed every single person who could possibly, from memory, there were plainclothes. There were uniformed sergeants who'd recently been promoted to general duty sergeants. However, they were previous detectives. They were pulled offline and pulled into that job as detectives.
Yep.
Simply because they needed more detectives. They just needed lots and lots of people investigating this matter. And I remember the first week was just absolute fury. Like it was just madness. But like you say, it was very controlled. Everyone knew their role. There was a person put in charge of Project Alpha, Project Bravo, Charlie Delta, Echo Foxtrot. There was someone in charge of each project, and they reported back to the senior investigator in charge, who from memory was either a senior sergeant or a superintendent involved in major crime. So they were running the investigation, but they needed all these resources just to gather the sheer volume of information. And it was done really well. And you've said it there. It's that rank structure, that structure where so many people can only look after so many more people. So, and they all report back to a head. But I was involved in sort of in the head a little bit. I was in the office management area with everyone else, and I was with, mate. I had imposter syndrome with the people I was working with. The detective sergeants I was working with were major crime, serious crime. I was about an 18-month, if not 2 year, 29. So I was 2 years. I was just under 2 years as a sergeant. I've been a detective for about 8 years, and I was operating with these extremely well-known, very competent major crime detective sergeants, and I learned so much in there, just about how the way we look at the information coming in, analyze that, develop further lines of inquiry, go back out and send those troops out to get further information on certain things. And mate, it was massive. I'll just go forward a little bit. It would be 4 months after that matter. I was lucky enough to attend a national negotiators course in Sydney, in Parramatta,
Yeah.
and I had the bloody uh, the privilege of speaking with a number of the negotiators who dealt with the Lint Cafe siege, and we were talking, and we could sit there and go, I can feel your frustration, because man, Monis never spoke to the negotiators. He spoke to negotiators through the hostages. And I remember sitting there going, that's incredible, but I can just imagine the size. And they were talking, they were saying things that I was so familiar with as a result of this job. Like, we were just overwhelmed. Like, this was such a huge job. It had such public interest. It had international public interest, and we were in the spotlight like you wouldn't believe. And I took my hat off to them. They were obviously bloody distressed by how that all went about, but I mean, so were the tactical operators, as we know lately. It was just one of those things, and a lot of lessons were learnt out of that. And I remember, for operational reasons, I won't talk about what we spoke about, but the response now would be, I think, a little bit more severe and a little bit earlier. So,
Yeah.
without going into detail, but I remember going into that space, I felt like an imposter in the Hoffmann investigation a little bit. Like, I knew these people, but we're talking about one of the biggest crimes that's happened in the Northern Territory in decades. And I remember talking to these guys at the Lint Cafe and going, no, I understand that. I understand that. So I didn't feel like an imposter talking to them, because I felt that I did bring a little bit of experience to the table in that realm. And that sort of shows how big that job was. Like, it was enormous. That it made. I take a little bit of pride in that I made a phone call, because I was a Darwin City shift supervisor very early, not 6 months before this job kicked off, or not even. And I rang the shift supervisor the phone, and I spoke to him and said, mate, what do you got? I'm coming. I'm a negotiator. We're just coming as negotiators. But just tell me what you got. And he's gone, yep, people shot here. Guys in the car, yep, people shot there. Oh, shit, mate, I don't know what's going on. I said, mate, have you got an active shooter? And he's gone, yep. And I reckon my little claim to fame there, and I said it later on, because I said it in the next briefing, I said, this is an active shooter incident. And it was from then on, it was called an active shooter. So I think I was detached from the immediate response.
Yep.
But I think that detachment allowed me to identify what we were dealing with. We were dealing with an active shooter. So, righto, what's that impose? That means immediate action, rapid deployment. Your job is no longer to cordon and contain. Your job is to immediately act, stop the killing, stop the dying. So I couldn't believe that I was saying to my colleagues, who I know well, bloody hell, you need to close with him and shoot him. And I remember but hearing from the tactical operators that night. Later on, obviously, there was a bit of a debrief after we'd kicked on for a few hours, and they were still involved. And I said, did you guys know what this was? And straight away they said, yeah, no, we're responding to an active shooter. We knew that. And I remember saying to one of them, so what was your plans? And then I got their body-worn camera, or they had recordings going in the car. I don't think it was actually body-worn, but they were running over, actions on. Right, understand what's going to happen. We're going to ram this vehicle, actions on, empty a magazine, just dump it into him. And obviously they're tactically aware. They're very well trained, and they're not going to murder somebody. If he's giving up, he's going to get arrested. But if he's actively trying to shoot people, they were just going to splatter him with the AR-15. So it was extremely full on. It was a very, very full on job. The response was madness. The investigation was just enormous. I mean, all of this can be read about, and because you got to remember, I know just then you said that the prosecution's one point. There was also a coronial inquest, I'm fairly sure, into
Yeah.
this. So that was another enormous enormous investigation, and yeah, it was huge, mate. That was a massive job, and I think I went back to Trident, and then obviously towards the end of the year, I was involved in COVID once the beginning of 2020 or middle of 2020, I went into that. So I didn't have a lot to do of the carriage of that all the way through. That was major crime, but mate, that was such a big job. And take my hat off to I don't know exactly who the OIC of all that was. So the officer in charge is someone who's responsible for that to go right through court. But they did a magnificent job. Like Ben Hoffmann got found guilty on all counts, sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The coronial inquest came out and was actually provided some learning points for police, but was overall supportive of police response. Yeah, mate, that was a day out. I'll give you the drum.
I'll tell you what. I think that day, even though I wasn't in the police anymore, made me proud to be part of the Northern Territory Police Force for a time, because I know they followed everything that we've been trained and taught and all that sort of stuff, and I think it's awesome. But mate, we're up to 55 minutes, so we're going to have to move on here.
Yeah, bloody oath, yep.
Yep. And mate, what we're going to do, so this week everybody knows that we release one a week on 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Daylight Saving Time. Let me tell you, Damo. So that's Queensland.
No, you said daylight Eastern Standard Time is Queensland. Eastern Daylight Saving Time is my time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So sorry, in Queensland time, because that's the real time.
Bit of controversy there, mate.
And anyway, but we're going to release one an hour later from one of our interviews we did up in the Northern Territory with the president of the Northern Territory Police Association, Nathan Finn. And mate, I tell you what, look, I thought I was a shit magnet. I got called a shit magnet plenty of times. I've got so many stories. I know you have exactly the same thing, but I can tell you what, it actually shocked us. What Nathan Finn had to say, wouldn't you say?
I'm a bigger shit magnet than you, and I tell you what, Finney makes me look like an admin clerk. It is worth listening to. Finney is a bloke I've always had a lot of time for, massively respected, and the fact that he is now the president of the Police Association, to me, is you could not get a better president. And
I agree.
I would just suggest to everybody, have a listen. If you're listening to this as it's released, seriously, go and park the car somewhere and listen to the next one, because it'll blow your socks off. What he has to say is just incredible.
It is. And yeah, we're extremely lucky to get him on there, and thank you, Nathan, for coming on. It was an honour, and there's a couple of laughs along the way as well. He's a great bloke. Fantastic.
Oh, he's a fantastic fella, mate. He's so human, it's not funny.
Yeah.
So it's really good. It's a really good interview. I'm very proud of that interview. I'm very proud of all the interviews we had up there. Actually, I was really fulfilling that trip. We're not going to let the cat out of the bag. We'll release them as we release them. But Nathan Finn coming up in about an hour if you're listening in, and in real time that is. But otherwise, definitely have a listen to Finney's interview. Mate.
Go straight onto it. I think it's a bit of a longer one as well, but I'll tell you what, to keep you entertained, probably better than this one.
Yeah.
No, well, depends where I'm sure it'll keep you entertained, but yeah, mate. It'll take up next 2 hours. Once you start listening to this one, it'll just sign off somewhere and with a beer or a cold wine, I reckon.
Yep, bloody oath. Well, Shelty, it's always a pleasure, mate.
It is.
And, I don't think we have to talk any crap anymore. We just let Finney talk for us.
Well, exactly right, mate. Yeah. I think it's it's time. Everybody's obviously sick of our voices, so time to move on. But we'll see you all again next week.
Absolutely, all the best to Ordinary Cops. Loving it. See you, boys.